What's going on, everybody? It's Willoughbys, and welcome back to the Lore Chronicles. If you are anything like me, then you are constantly chasing the best deck in any given format. And for Attack of the Vine, there is truly no clear winner. We are seeing constant new and very strong decks enter the metagame and win or spike or do very well in the top 8, what have you, at various different events. And it honestly seems like it's not even that the meta is changing from week to week, but rather day by day or even hour by hour. So I have been studying, looking at all of the different deck lists as they have popped up, ones that have good finishes, ones that I'm seeing at locals, ones that I'm seeing against friends, talked about in discords, what have you. I have seen several different lists continue to pop up, and as I look through each of the lists, whether they're different variations of Amber and Emerald, different variations of Steel decks, etc, there are key cards throughout each of these decks that have continued to shine and prove themselves as leagues above the rest of all of the other cards in Attack of the Vine. So I want to take a moment in this video to give a shout out and talk about my personal best cards from Attack of the Vine, the cards that I think are truly the most impactful to come out of this set. And I'm hoping that if you have not been thinking about these cards, whether it be putting them in your own decks or when you're playing against certain color combinations, understanding, hey, they might have this card, I need to play around it or be wary of it. I want to hopefully highlight these super impactful cards for you to start thinking about, whether it is adding them to your list or making sure that you don't get got by these super powerful cards. Without further ado, let's go through each of the 6 inks and talk about the most powerful card in every single deck. All right, so we're going to start off with Amber, and honestly, I think Amber is the single best ink color out there right now. I think if you had to just pick from square one, what is the first color you should put in your deck, I think it's 100% Amber. There are so many strong contenders here. And so this one was one of the hardest ones to pick a best card from or most impactful card from. So before we get to the number 1 most impactful card, in my opinion, let's start with some honorable mentions. And our first 2 honorable mentions are going to be Gaston, Superior Archer, and Mike Wazowski, Heroic Climber. Let's start with Gaston here. This uncommon has very quickly become a staple in certain archetypes of Amber decks. Okay, obviously Gaston, being a 5-cost character, is not going to be a staple in aggro builds, but I think anything truly that is not purely aggro, whether it is control or mid-range, you are going to see at least 2 copies sometimes of Gaston in there. So what does Gaston do? Well, he's got 3 strength, 4 willpower, which for a 5-cost character is a bit underwhelming. Typically our 5-cost characters nowadays are statted at 5/5. However, his ability, watch this, when you play this character, you may banish chosen character with 5 strength or more, is truly what makes this character shine. Like I said, the new standard, I guess like base rate or like good rate that you want to see on your characters for a stat line is going to be 5 strength and 5 willpower. If you can't get 5 willpower, you certainly want 5 strength, right? Like that is the gold standard. You know, a lot of cards right now are reaching that threshold on strength, and because of that, Gaston becomes a powerhouse of a card where all you have to do is play this character and it is just point and click removal right there. Plus he gets to quest for lore, sing songs, challenge, and all of those things that we love our characters to do, and not just be in action, right? So the fact that he's a body, the fact that he's a character really helps him shine as well. And even when characters are not at that 5 strength threshold, there are plenty of characters characters that you can combo Gaston with in order to get them to that strength level, right? So think about cards like Eilonwy, Princess of Lear, right? She can quest and she has support, so she can add her strength to an opposing character, and suddenly when Gaston would not be able to attack a 3 strength character, you have Eilonwy to allow him to come into play and banish that character because you've just added strength to it. There's other characters like Lilo and Stitch, which we'll talk about later, that also combo very well with Gaston. Augustine Madrigal, another one. Just any support characters are really going to be great, but also, you know, there's some cheeky tech choices here and there where you never expected to, but you give the strength buff where normally, you know, when the cards were printed, when the game designers were making them, they're thinking, hey, we got to put this on our own characters. That's why the players are going to play this card. Us being the players, it's up to us to get creative and say, you know what? This just says to chosen character. As long as it doesn't have ward, I can choose my opponent, and then I can follow it up with a Gaston. So loving this card. Don't think it fits into every single build though. So it's going to be a honorable mention. Next up, we've got Mike Wazowski, Heroic Climber, or hold on, rub my glasses. Daisy Duck, is that you? So this Mike Wazowski, again, another powerhouse of an Amber card coming in Attack of the Vine. Yes, that is a 0-4 stat line, but read this Find a Friend ability. When you play this character and whenever he quests, each player reveals the top card of their deck. If it's a character card, they may put it into their hand. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of their deck. This card is just so good. It had to be on the list of honorable mentions. I think there's a couple different things holding it back from being the single best Amber card in the set. One of those things being is that this also, much like Gaston, is not playable in every single archetype, right? Think about it, like control builds, those are not going to want to play something like Mike Wazowski because you're not just 60 character deck, right? You have a lot of actions and things to help you kind of control the board. So Mike Wazowski has made aggro decks incredibly powerful. It is one of the main reasons that Emerald and Amber right now is still so powerful, even after losing, you know, Tramp and a lot of the dogs package that was originally there. But aggro is still very, very good for Emerald and Amber, and Mike Wazowski is the premier reason why that deck is so incredibly strong. And so even though he only really fits into an Amber shell, he is so good that he had to make the list. All right, let's move on to some more of our honorable mentions, and this one is a little bit of a pair here. That is going to be Sully. Okay, both iterations of Sully in Amber. So we have Sully, the new boss, and Sully and Boo, Scare Buddies. Let's start with Sully here. So Sully, the new boss, 4-4 stat line. Okay, on a 5-cost uninkable character, usually a bit of a hard sell. So they're gonna have to really convince us here on why this card is worth including in our decks. Well, let me tell you exactly why. Bodyguard is nice, don't get me wrong, but that is not the reason this card is in this list. Okay, the reason why is because of that rehire ability. When you play this character, you may return a character card from your discard to your hand. That's insane, you guys. That is any character in your discard can come back into your hand. Even better, Sully grabs himself. Sully can grab any character that's there. And so we've seen abilities like this. Think back to just last set on that Hercules, okay? But that had a lot of different conditions. Sure, you could choose any card in your deck, but you had to discard your hand in order to be able to do it. With this Sully, you can still have your hand nice and healthy, plus you get the advantage of that bodyguard ability, so this isn't just an understated character. When it comes in, yes, the stat line itself may be underwhelming, but when you figure that he can come in as a bodyguard to instantly protect the rest of your board that you've been building up for 5 turns until you drop this character, it makes it so much better, and it makes it so much more worth the trade-off of, sure, you're taking a little bit of hit on the stat points, it is an uninkable card, but I think overall it truly does just feel so worth it. And I think that this card, even more so than Sully and Boo, has found its way into so many different shells, and I think truly is a very adaptable card in many situations. Now, I don't think Sully and Boo is nearly as good as Sully the New Boss, but I think because of the kind of loopability and interaction that these two share, it was definitely worth mentioning, especially because this can be a standout card in something like Ruby and Amber, which we saw take down the Palm Harbor, Florida CCQ, piloted by Humble there. So Sully and Boo, let's talk about it. This is a combo shift 4. So on turn 4, you can have a 6/5 character in play, okay? But even more than that, you can shift this onto on turn 5, you play Sully, the New Boss. Turn 6, you shift Sully and Boo onto that Sully, and this character, the ability, the power of friendship, says when this character is banished, if any of the cards that were under them are character cards, you may play those characters from your discard for free. So if we're not keeping up here, allow me to break this down. Turn 5, boom, you play Sully, New Boss, bodyguard it or don't, doesn't matter. You get a character card back from your discard, okay? Turn 6, boom, shift Sully and Boo, okay? Now you can quest, sure, or you can do some challenging. Either way, what this means is when this character gets banished, okay, whether it's by you taking a favorable, challenge because you're about to get these cards back, we'll talk about that in a second, or you're just going to quest out and let your opponents challenge into you. And again, 6/5 stat line, he is banishing back anything that looks his way, okay? What's going to happen is Sully and Boo is going to get banished, go to the discard pile, okay? When it's banished, because you shifted it right on top of this Sully the New Boss, you can now play Sully the New Boss for free. It doesn't matter if it's your opponent's turn, okay? So even if it's your turn, boom, you can play it. Even if it's your opponent's turn, boom, you can play it for free, okay? So you've played that Sully the New Boss. Then what are you gonna do, guys? Which again, bodyguard back in effect, the rest of your character is protected again. What are you gonna do, guys? You're gonna take a character from your discard pile, I don't know, maybe Sully and Boo Scare Buddies, and then you can just keep doing it over and over and over and over and over again, okay? So that card, definitely an honorable mention, purely because I don't think on its own it's quite the same level of strength as these other Amber cards that we've talked about, but I do think that interaction in and of itself deserves some attention. All right, last one on our honorable mentions for Amber is gonna be Lilo and Stitch, Fun Loving Friends. This is a 5-cost 3/5, okay, which again, in terms of a 5-cost stat line, leaves a little bit to be desired, right? But check out the rest of this card. First of all, quest for 3, crazy. Shifts for 3, crazy. Resist +1 feels so good, and support. So like we were talking about earlier, you can combo it with things like this Gaston, or you just get to quest, right? You love questing for 3, but maybe you can take a lower character, something that you don't care as much about, maybe even your Mike Wazowski that we talked about from earlier, give him that support. Now it's a 3/4 and you got your 3 lore, okay? So just an amazing card. But above all, the best, most impactful card from Attack of the Vine in Amber is going to be Mei Lin Lee, Losing Control. This 3-cost 2/3. Wait a second, rub my glasses. Ariel Spectacular Singer, is that you? Yes, Mei Lin Lee is going to be our best card with that red Panda Power ability. When you play this character, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal a red panda character card or a song card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So yes, this does not have Singer 5 like Ariel Spectacular Singer did, but it does have the search ability, which is even better sometimes because she can choose herself. It says a song card or a red panda, right? Well, if you look at it, she is storyborn, Hero and red panda. Guys, come on. If you whiff on the Malin Lee, you just grab another one and you dig 4 more cards deeper. Ariel could never. I'm telling you, this card is the single best Amber card, and primarily, in my humble opinion, I think that because it fits into a wide range of shells. Some aggro decks are still going to play this Malin Lee. Control decks are certainly playing her, and mid-range decks are certainly playing her. So because of her pure flexibility and how good Amber is at singing and utilizing songs, Malin Lee not only grabbing songs, but also being able to grab herself should she not find any songs in the top 4 cards of your deck, really just makes this card so much better. And I truly believe this is the best Amber card that we have in Attack of the Vine. Let's move on to Amethyst. Now, before we get into Amethyst, I do have to say, unfortunately, Amethyst is, in my opinion, a very underwhelming color combo. I do not personally feel that this deck, this ink combination as it stands right now in Attack of the Vine solely, okay, just Attack of the Vine cards, I don't think if there are Amethyst decks that are doing well, it is solely because of any Attack of the Vine cards in Amethyst, okay? I think that Amethyst as a whole is such a strong package, so of course, Amethyst decks are always going to do well and dominate, but truly, I mean, I was shocked to be looking through Amethyst cards and, you know, pulling out so many Amber after Amber after Amber, then going to Amethyst and being like, I'm gonna have to force myself to pick a runner-up. You know what I mean? I will say, though, I think that Amethyst kind of deserved it. They kind of needed a break. They've been kind of crushing the game now for several sets in a row. I mean, really since set 1, just like, really, I mean, set 2 is really where Amethyst shined, but even since set 1, that was still a meta staple. Like, every single set since the beginning of the game, since the game was released, Amethyst has been on top. And so I think it's okay that there are not as many Amethyst cards that are super powerful, in my opinion, at least so far, in Attack of the Vine. That being said, let's look at our honorable mention, being Merida Wisp Conjurer. 4 cost uninkable, always a little bit dicey there, but she does a 3/3 stat line. Focused Energy. Okay, this character may enter play exerted to draw a card and beckon during your turn. Whenever another character of yours enters play exerted, you may draw a card. So this is an honorable mention because there are going to be Amethyst decks that are utilizing this ability. Of course, she herself can come in and draw a card on play, so that is always going to be useful. But ideally, you do try to get some use out of her by playing other characters, like that Sully, the new boss, if you're playing Amber and Amethyst, to come in exerted, you know, things with bodyguards, so that way you can also be drawing cards all the same. I do think this card is going to see some play. I think it's, you know, doing well so far, but I just don't think it's like anything crazy compared to some of the most impactful cards that we've seen, or at least that I've seen in my testing, right? But let me know, you know, maybe there are things that I'm missing in Amethyst. But before we get into the rest of these, let's talk about the number 1. Okay, let's talk about the best, most impactful card in Amethyst. I think it might surprise you. No, it is not our legendary, but it is instead Morph Little Imitator. This 2-cost character with 1 strength and 2 willpower is only an uncommon, Willow. You just showed us a legendary. How could this possibly be the best card in Amethyst? Well, let's take a look at the ability Advanced Mimicry. You can shift any character on top of this character. Yes, my friends, bots, like we talked about with RMB on the channel just a couple of weeks ago. Morph is a key card in shifting out and enabling the shift, rather, of these Omni droids. And I think, you know, Amethyst Steel is truly going to be one of the pillars of this format, whether it's tier 1 or tier 1.5 or maybe even tier 2. It's of course going to be very powerful, and Morph, I think, is something that you have to play in these decks in order to make the most use of it. I think it's just a really cool, versatile card that is always going to see play, much like Morph Space Goo, the Morph that came before it, now rotated out, because you can shift anything on top of it, right? And I think that that's just so powerful to be able to do, especially as more cards become available in the card pool. I think this is just going to be the all-around, you know, best card that Amethyst gets, and I'm super excited to play with it. But let's move on to Emerald. All right, so Emerald is another one, much like Amber, that I personally am very excited about this set. I think Emerald cards have really been surprising me more and more and more. Not only every time I play them, but every time I look at top cuts, every time I talk to other players and seeing their lists and the things that they are coming up with. I think that the next couple of big events moving forward, we're really going to start to see Emerald break through even more so outside of just the Amber and Emerald shell, right? It makes sense that because that is really like, there's like 3 or 4 different versions of Amber and Emerald, and all of them are like some of the best decks out there right now. It makes sense that I had the hardest time with these colors, but I want to say even outside of the Emerald aggro, Amber Emerald aggro, stuff that's going on, I think there's a lot of really great cards that I tried to focus on outside of just the aggro shell that I really want to call some attention to. So let's start off with a little bit of a thematic one here. Okay, some of our honorable mentions are going to be Todd and Copper, and also Todd Clever Fox. So let's start with Todd and Copper, Best of Friends. This 4 cost is a 3/3 quest for 2 with evasive. All right, on its face, nothing too crazy, but then you look at that shift 2. Okay, turn 1 you can play a Todd, turn 2 you shift the Todd and Copper. Now you have a 2 questing evasive that also swings for 3. I mean, it's just been pretty great. I think the card is good enough, and I think it like sees a lot of play. It can really accelerate some game plans, and I think outside of the aggro shells, I think this is going to be something that we see a lot of in things like Emerald Steel, which I'm really excited about moving forward. So just wanted to throw it in there as one to be on the lookout for. All right. Next up, we have Todd Clever Fox with this ability, Problem Solving. When you play this character, draw 2 cards, then choose and discard a card. So I love this Clever Fox here. I honestly was not expecting to be blown away by this card. Again, this is only an uncommon, the stat line very underwhelming. It's a 1/2, but honestly, I think it's just very good. Like, you actually don't use this for the shift at all. You use this solely for the problem solving ability. And, yes, you do have to discard a card, but you get to look at 2 cards. So when you play this character, in effect, you're drawing a card, and who doesn't love even more options, right? So rather than just drawing 1 off the top, you get to see 2 off the top, and sure, you got to throw 1 away, but at least you got to see 2 cards deeper into your deck and pick the one that meant the most in that situation. I see this come up a lot in Amber and Emerald Circle of Life, so a little bit more of a control build where you really need to filter your hand. And yes, we have cards from other sets like Gate and Moliere from last set that does that really well, but I think this card for Attack of the Vine has been standout, and something where normally I wouldn't look twice at a 3 cost 1/2 stat line, but because of how good it feels to do this ability and filter through your deck in certain situations, I think it's definitely an honorable mention. Because if you have not considered this card and you are somebody who has been overlooking it, I think especially with both of these cards, give them another look. See if you can make them work in your decks. All right, our next 2 honorable mentions are going to be a little bit of a wild one here. Dr. Bushroot, Evil Botanist, and Rapunzel Escaping the Tower. Now, let's talk about Rapunzel first, because she's a little bit more of an obvious one. She is definitely popping up in Emerald decks out there right now. Again, specifically for me, I have been enjoying Emerald Steel, so I've been seeing her in builds like that. With Rapunzel's tower, or excuse me, Rapunzel Escaping the Tower, yes, it is a 2 cost, 1 willpower, or excuse me, 2 strength, 1 willpower, 1 cost. But let's look at this Call of Adventure ability. Once during your turn, you may discard a card to give this character +1 lore and evasive until the start of your next turn. So if you discard a card, she is going to quest for 2 and be evasive. Who doesn't love that? Okay, this is like super, super awesome. Yes, there is a downside. You have to discard the card, but like we learned from Mr. Burns before, there are no downsides. There are only upsides that we have not figured out yet. And so I think you can really make use of Rapunzel and turning this downside into an upside with things like Look What You've Done, which we'll talk about a little bit later. That's a steal card, you know, it's a steal action where when it enters your discard pile, or excuse me, when you discard it, you can choose to basically play it, right? So, you know, that makes it so you can play Rapunzel on 1, turn 2, you know, you discard Look What You've Done to, you know, deal 2 damage to whatever they've got out on the board. And then you get to quest for 2 with an evasive. It just feels so good. So I really like the little synergies that we are seeing within Attack of the Vine. And I think this card is a super, super cool one and definitely one to look out for. On the other side, some of you may be like, Willow, what are you talking about? Okay. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this just got added today, like a little bit before I started recording, because I was not aware of this card. Like, obviously I knew what it was, but it wasn't even on my radar, okay? But I played against it a couple different times, completely out of nowhere, and it was better than I was expecting, and I thought it was a pretty fun honorable mention. So again, 5 costs with a 4/3 stat line leaves a little bit to be desired, but when you take a look at the rest of the card, questing for 3 feels good. Questing for 3 feels even better when the card has Ward, you guys. Ward is so key in this metagame right now, especially with all of the different actions, some of which we've been talking about or will get to later on. I mean, having Ward is a really great way to protect your characters right now. And so I think it makes it so that if you get this 5 cost character on the board, you are guaranteed to quest for 3. And yes, 4 strength is not 5 strength, but it's still pretty good in this meta right now. And then of course, fair is fair. Whenever this character's challenged, chosen opponent chooses and discards a card. Well, your opponents have to challenge because it has Ward. That is the only way to get rid of it. So they are absolutely going to be discarding a card 9 times out of 10 when you are getting rid of Dr. Bushroot. So I think it's a pretty good card. It wasn't something that was on my radar, and I thought it would be fun to point out to you guys. Something that you can maybe start looking at for your Emerald builds. Give it a try. See if it works. But all right. Let's move on to the number 1 best, most impactful card in Attack of the Vine for Emerald. Gonna be my adventure book. Now this card in a vacuum is not the best card, but I think the reason why I have selected this one specifically to not just be an honorable mention, but rather to actually be the best, most impactful card for my pick for Emerald is purely because of how surprising this card has been. This card has surprised me in such a beautiful and wonderful way, and I think the same for the rest of the community. Maybe they wouldn't call it beautiful and wonderful, but it's a shock to see what this card has been able to enable and the deck that it fits in. I mean, it's really just a really cool card, and let's break it down. So we do have a 3 cost item, okay, with the ability New Memories. You exert this item, pay 1 to reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a non-character card or a character card named Kevin, put it into your hand. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your deck. Listen, I love Kevin, okay? She's great. I think she's super funny. She's super cool. Whenever I go to Animal Kingdom in Disney World, I make sure to say what's up to Kevin and take pictures, okay? But she is actually the worst part about this card, okay? The best part about this card is all of the other stuff. The revealing a card, and if it's a non-character card, putting that into your deck. If you have not seen it, I want to make a video all about this deck, so let me know in the comments below if you are interested in talking more about the only Kevin, only non-characters, whatever deck. But long story short, you play Adventure Book and a bunch of other actions and items like Buzz's Arm as well. There's a couple other ones that are in there, but what you do is you use My Adventure Book to find all of your cards, because none of your cards are characters. So you just draw things like put that thing back to then bounce their characters, or you use My Adventure Book and you top deck like Stranger Things. Like, it's just like there's so many different and cool things that you can do in this deck. Again, I want to talk all about it, but if you know, My Adventure Book, as frustrating as I'm sure it is for many Illumineers, has been the enabler of such a cool new deck type that we truly have not seen in Disney Lorcana before. Yes, we had heavily items item focused decks, but they were never 100% actions and items. And so you got to give it up to my adventure book being the first of its kind, making something like that possible. Super cool. And I can't wait to talk about that deck in a future video. All right, let's move on to Ruby. Guys, I hate to say it, I honestly have not been very impressed with Ruby at all. A lot of people have been really disappointed with this color for a while now, right? For a couple sets now, even pre-rotation, Ruby was just not strong enough, and it was formerly, you know, some people's favorite ink color. They loved specifically Ruby and Amethyst. People have been holding on for hope that Ruby is going to make a beautiful and big comeback, and unfortunately it just hasn't. So no runners up here. All this is going to be is Red Alert. This is the best and most impactful card that Ruby got in Attack of the Vine, in my opinion. And Red Alert is a 4-cost action that says banish chosen character with 3 strength or less. If you have a monster character in play, chosen opponent loses 1 lore. I really like Red Alert. When I was initially testing it in Ruby and Amber, I do think it was definitely worth the slot. I think there's a lot of things that it can target specifically against your worst matchup in that deck, at least, usually being aggro decks, right? And so it's kind of got this weird tension with Gaston where, you know, in Ruby and Amber specifically, Gaston wants to target those stronger things, this wants to target those smaller things, but I find that it's just nice to have a little bit of flexibility there for both. This hits things like an Eleanor, okay? And as we know from last set and before, Eleanor is a problem, all right? Moving forward, Eleanor is going to continue to be a problem, and I think having something like Red Alert was absolutely needed, and I think saves a lot of players games. You know, sometimes you are just hoping to see that Red Alert off the top. If you play Ruby, you know what I'm talking about. We love just point and click removal, just get it on out of here, and yeah, so unfortunately not too much to say about Ruby. I hope it gets its time in the sun again very, very soon. Let's move on to Sapphire. All right, so Sapphire is unfortunately, again, one of those that does not even have a runner-up. It's been really difficult for me to, you know, look at these cards and figure out what I think is going to be the most impactful from Attack of the Vine specifically. There was not a lot of things, like there are Sapphire decks, you know, that are kind of doing cool things in the meta right now, but unfortunately, you know, not anything that is Attack of the Vine specific. So I did my best, but I don't know. It's maybe it's also me, you know, historically, traditionally, I've never been a real Sapphire gamer, so nothing was really tickling my fancy there. But I will say, giving credit where credit is due, we do have one card that I think, in my opinion, is the best, most impactful card in Attack of the Vine, and that's going to be Darkwing Duck and Launchpad. Okay, Wardwing, as RMB, once again our guest from a couple of weeks ago, pointed out to us, as he shall now be nicknamed. This is a 7-cost shift for 5/7 stat line, questing for 2, with again that ward keyword, you gotta love to see it, and the ability Victory Pose. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. So I think obviously Sapphire Steel, Duck Detectives is going to be the deck that utilizes this the best, and it's going to be it remains to be seen whether or not that's going to be a top meta contender, but I still wanted to put this here because I do think it's worth thinking about. Again, ward as a keyword, being able to shift this early on 5, so you're kind of guaranteeing, you know, 2 lore potentially, because it does have that 5 strength, and then of course that 7 willpower is going to allow this card to 9 times out of 10 banish something without being traded, without being banished back in that challenge. So if you are playing Sapphire Steel, I think you have to play Darkwing Duck and Launchpad, and I think it's the best way to play Sapphire Steel out there right now. So that's why it had to make the list. All right, let's move on to Steel. So lots of fun things to say about Steel. Let's start with some of our runner-ups, of course, but overall, this color pairing, I think, is getting better and better and better every single day, every single meta. Even when you think, oh, it's down, no, it is not out. It comes back and surprises you once again. I love Steel. It has grown on me so much from first set where I hated it to now where I love it and want to play it. Okay, I think this is just a tried and true, one of those classic ink colors that has always felt good and will always continue to. Let's take a look at some Attack of the Vine specific cards that I am enjoying in this metagame. That's going to be some runner-ups here: Omnidroid Ultimate Iteration and Darkwing Duck Shadowy Superhero. Let's start with Omnidroid here. So obviously, we talked about earlier, Amethyst Steel bots. This is the, one of the biggest new additions to bots in Attack of the Vine. This shift for 6, right? So yes, it is an 8 cost, but it shifts on 6, which is very relevant. You usually, more often than not, can shift this on 6. You usually have at least one Omnidroid out there. Resist +2, non-conditional resist +2, crazy. So this is essentially an 8/10 if they wanted to take it out in one quick swing, right? Questing for 2 feels great. And then return on investment. When you shift this character, you may return all cards under it to your hand. Why this is so good, I think, and why it feels so good is because it's kind of like pseudo card draw, because you can shift this onto like a stack of Omnidroids. Like you could shift this and send 3 Omnidroids back to your hand, right? Where then you can so let's say, you played the 1-drop Omnidroid, you turn 2 shifted, the 4 cost uninkable Omnidroid to deal 2 damage. Later on, if you shift this Omnidroid onto that 4 cost, then both of them are going back to hand. So that same turn, you pay 3 and you're dealing 2, right? Because you just play the 1-drop, shift on top of it. So, yes, this character comes into play, but then it also can do some other things, kind of refills the hand in some ways. If you don't need Omnidroids in that moment, it can give you some discard fodder depending on the deck build. I just think this Omnidroid is super hard to remove, outside of obviously, things like Gaston. Super hard to remove and just, so strong. Like when this hits the board, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do. And Bots has been a super fun archetype. So also, Darkwing Duck here, this shadowy superhero, 3 cost uninkable, 2/5, very interesting stat line, right? It's kind of like the 5 willpower is nice, I guess, for a 3 cost, but it only swings for 2, so it's like, I don't know. But what makes this so great is that preemptive strike. When you play this character, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. There's a couple of different decks that have been making use of this. I don't think this is something that is going to be in every single Steel build, but I do think it has been a really good performer, on top of the fact that it is a Darkwing Duck, that has some nice energies within the Steel package as a whole. Being a detective, makes it do some interesting things as well in that Detectives build that we were just talking about. But I don't know, overall, I think it's just an interesting card and kind of one that maybe hasn't seen the most play yet, but I think in time, as sets kind of continue to come out, or even in this meta as things kind of continue to develop, I think there is definitely a place for a 3 cost card that comes in and pings something. You know what I mean? All right, let's talk about the last runner-up here before we talk about the best card in Steel. Look what you've done. We were talking about this earlier. 2 cost inkable action, deal 2 damage to chosen character. During your turn, when you discard this card, you may play it from your discard. You do have to pay for it though, right? So this is Baboom. Baboom is back, baby. Okay, we are paying 2, we're dealing 2. It's inkable should you not need it, but what's so great about this card is, of course, that discard ability, right? If you have something like an Angel Experiment 6/2/4, you use Look What You've Done to discard, right? So, or excuse me, you use the Angel to discard the Look What You've Done, but because you discarded it, you can also just pay the 2 to still do 2 to still do teal. Oh my god, to still do teal. Guys, to still do 2 damage. We got there. Oh my gosh. Okay. To still do 2 damage to something. And so then you're doing 4 total if you combine it with something like Angel. All in all, I think this is just super interesting. I think it's like a really fun, it's not technically an ability, right? Because there's not like a word there, but like this ability on a card, I think it's a super fun, interesting thing. I've really been enjoying discovering, you know, what it's like to put things into the discard and then grab them back, and or not grab them back, but be able to then use them even though you're discarding them. It kind of is like makes being discarded down feel a little less bad, which is significant because as we've seen from previous metas, nobody likes being discarded down, right? All right, let's talk about the best steel card above all in Attack of the Vine. That is going to be Violet Par Super Resilient. This card, this card, so very beautiful, does so many amazing things, and I think it should be in all of your steel decks. Let's talk about it. This is a 5 cost for 4. Okay, yeah, we don't love the 4/4 stat line, but we kind of do, and let me tell you why. Okay, so this has resist +1, so in effect it is a 4/5, right? They have to, if they wanted to get rid of it in one foul swoop, they would have to do 5 damage. So this is essentially a 4/5. Why this stat line is so beautiful is because it's just big enough to get over things like Red Alert, right? And then on the other side, this also gets around Gaston, right? So you can't just click it, boom, with the Red Alert. You can't just click it, boom, with the Gaston. I just think, you know, it's a really sticky card. It's hard to get rid of in that way. You kind of have to challenge it or have a ton of characters with the strength on board to get rid of it. Let's not forget, she shifts for 3, guys. This just feels so good when you have a 1-drop Violet and you have a 2-drop Violet. Like, are you kidding me? Questing for 2 feels amazing as well. And then let's talk about this ability, Heroic Synergy, really making the card here. Whenever you play this or another hero character, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. Well, the fact that she gets this ability when she is played, beautiful, right? You can shift her on 3, kind of sculpt your hand early, or if you play her late game, once again, kind of sculpt your hand early. Also, it's a May ability. You don't have to. That's significant. And if you are playing this Violet, you definitely have other other heroes in your deck, i.e. the other 3 Violets at the very least, plus if you're playing the shift line. So there's just a lot of ways to sculpt your hand, and because this isn't steel, if you're playing things like the look what you've done, you know, if you put that into your deck because it could be there because it's legal, you can then discard those things to be able to get them, get use out of them, even though you are discarding a card. So then you didn't even really discard a card, did you? Because you still got to use it. So I don't know, I think this Violet Par is super great, making her the best card in steel. And that's it. Okay, those are all of our cards, or at least my pick for the best, most impactful cards per ink color. Of course, this is just my opinion. You know, this is just based on what I've been playing or seeing played / played against. There's of course inherently gonna be some bias there because I'm biased towards certain decks. You know, there's certain decks that I really enjoy playing and certain archetypes that I don't like as much, right? Like, I don't usually play aggro as much, so I don't know as much about the aggro decks. Try to keep up with them, try to watch them, but it's not the same as, you know, studying lists is not the same as literally playing them. Right now, I'm very partial to Emerald Steel, so I'm super excited about some of those cool cards. You know, I haven't played a lot of like Sapphire right now. I haven't played a lot of Ruby right now, so it's kind of hard for me to pick cards for those particular archetypes. You guys see where I'm going with this. All in all, let me know for you guys, what are your personal best cards? And if you haven't yet, you know, played with some of these cards or even considered some of these cards in your decks, take a look at them. I think that there's a lot of cards that I've put on this list, especially for the runner-ups, that you would never expect. But if I had to pick just 3 cards across all of the ones that we've talked about today that you should absolutely be playing with in your decks and can even be a starting point for your decks, it's definitely going to be these 3 right here, mostly the first 2, but my adventure book is also on here because I think truly, again, like I said, complete standout. These cards are standouts of the set, have really been like defining cards, and the fact that something like my adventure book could look so easily skippable, we'll say, something you don't feel like you need to pay attention to at first, becoming so fun and so relevant and creating such a brand new archetype in the game. It's got to be one of those top 3 best. And of course, Malin Lee and Violet Parr for all the reasons I outlined earlier. I think overall, taking a look at the set as a whole, these are some of my favorite and I think the best, most impactful cards in the set. So if you do not have, especially the first 2 in your decks and you were playing those colors, get them in there, okay? And if you're not playing a steel deck, if you're not playing an amber deck, take a look. Maybe there is more to be discovered. But that's going to be all for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what your best cards are. Don't forget to subscribe, join the Discord. We've got a ton of fun new stuff coming soon with the new coconut format and other things. But that's going to be it for me. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.